I'd like to call this meeting of the Region 12 Board of Education to order at 7:03 p.m. Stephanie, do you want to take the term in the quorum?
Joe Abdallah. Here. Tom Bonita. Oh, Greg Thomas.
Here.
Alex.
Here.
Okay.
So that's 11. And Jane on the TV.
Right.
All right. Is there any public comment on any matter on this evening's agenda? Is there any member of the public who would like to comment on a matter on this evening's agenda? Seeing none, we'll move on. Presentation of the 24-25 budget highlights.
Tom.
Thank you. It's nice to see the board tonight, and thank you for the attention. Can you go to the next slide then? Okay. So on this slide, you're able to see a basic summary of our request and how it compares to last year's up 1.9%. And then a brief discussion of how we were able to maintain relative stability in what we're asking for without really cutting back on any services or experience for our kids. And just so happens that our needs and our proposed expenditures had a lot of ins and outs, the things that canceled each other out, bringing us to where we are. And here are some examples of things like that. For example, in the textbook line items, we had an $8,938 decrease in science textbooks, but other increases in middle school social studies textbooks and career tech ed textbooks. It's basically a wash. They almost even out. We also had some decreases in our requests for enrichment without any cost to the quality of the services that we'll deliver. So, for example, we're down $6,700 in middle school, but that's because we do a lot of really important leadership building activities with our middle school kids, and we've taken them off site under Mike Croft's leadership and Jason Conway's leadership to do rope confidence courses and other events like that build leadership. And we found out that we could get that same experience based upon what Mr. Conway knows how to do on his own here, and another comparable program offered by 4-H. So that let us deliver basically the same quality, keeping the cost down. Another example is we're going to be down a little bit in what we're asking for outside speakers. We want to continue the trend of working to support our climate that we started last year, and outside speakers are an important part of that. We have a lot of internally going on that's important, but that guru from another land can come in with sometimes extra credibility and impact on the kids and make them think about things. And the ADL is a great partner for us. I mean, some of you remember we used them last year to great success. The reason that program is powerful is because you don't do it every year with the same kids. You cycle through. So we want to call back to those themes. And we're going to bring in a different speaker this year who I've also worked with and vetted, a man named Dr. Fallon, who is a clinical psychologist, but he puts on what you might call a one-person show where in age-appropriate ways, he role plays and acts out certain experiences to raise student awareness and help them think out about experiences and kindness. But that was not as costly as the ADL was. So again, we were able to save some costs there. But at the bottom, you see we also have some increases, like we're requesting more for our after-school academic support program. We have the Easy and Smart Academies. They're really important for our kids. And in the past, just to be cost conscious, we've been sort of starting them a little later and ending them a little earlier. And we're asking now to fund them nearly fully so that we can support our kids for a larger part of the year. That's going to cost an extra $2,500. We also want to be sure that we have expert consultation to help us build the new schedule and make it sync in PowerSchool. And some of that, we have people here who are crackerjacks and can do that work, and they will. But some of this gets so specialized that you have to bring in a PowerSchool consultant that will help you make that schedule come alive. And the last bit at the bottom is for more clerical substitutes. So when you do the math on all this, it's basically a wash, and we were able to get what we need without a great increase in what we're seeking. The next slide just summarizes our program improvement requests. We're doing a lot of great things even now, after discussions that we've had, even some of them here in this room, over how important math instruction is to our kids, our students, our parents, our community, our board. And part of that, we think the research shows, is bringing in a certified math professional to do intervention work with our kids, and we are asking for that. And I described Mr. Fallon, Dr. Fallon a minute ago from the other slide, and we think he's going to be an important part of our social and emotional learning package next year. And we're asking for his presence as one of our program improvement requests. That summarizes our position, and I'm happy to take questions if there are any. Appreciate your attention.
Hey, everybody. So the agri-science budget, it mostly involved just shifts in our current budget. So the first kind of major shift was a $10,000 shift from various line items in our budget to our field trip account. The reason for this was we intend on bringing at least 40 students with us to National Convention next year with a coach bus here. So this is a big change from the 10-ish students in the past, and I know that the board and the community has really wanted us to bring a lot of kids here, and I think it would really help the program in the school. So this is sort of one of the main big changes in our proposed budget for next year. You can see we do have a slight decrease in the overall budget. This is a result of shifting funds around sort of based on trends from the past school years, as well as meeting with the Ag Science Department and sort of hearing their vision for where they want to take their individual programs. Actually resulted in a very small decrease in our overall budget. There won't be any staff changes for the next school year, but I do intend on requesting another agri-science teacher for the 25-26 school year. I think there's a lot of reasons why this would benefit our school and our program. We have a lot of courses that we have created in order to field all of the students' academic interests, and this additional teacher would help us be able to offer all those courses, especially the ECE classes is really, I'm amazed at the interest of those classes this year, as well as keeping our 7th grade and 8th grade feeder classes. This person hopefully would help us increase student engagement in the plant science facility. They would offer more support for extracurriculars. We do tons of stuff after school. And 4 or 5 of us, we do get a lot done, but another person here could lead more events, make more suggestions, chaperone more field trips, just would help in the extracurricular department as well. And then just above all, somebody to take charge and make the plant science facility their own, I think is necessary. So this is our projected enrollment for next school year. So the freshman row is really the new data. So this kind of just wrapped up. Recruiting and interviews and acceptances just finished. We were able to admit 60 students. We also heard back from every student, and every single student said yes, which is pretty remarkable, I think, so quickly. But you can see the breakdown of numbers by class and by district. So next year we 38 of our 60 will be from sending towns from out of district, and 22 will be from in district. These other rows are I presented these at another meeting as well, but this is how it stacks up. Before I hand it over to Nicole, would you guys do you have any questions on these 2 slides?
You said that, you offered 60 positions and all were accepted?
Yeah.
How many did you, people that applied did not get, were not part of these 60?
There's 54 kids on the wait list.
So there's about 50-50.
Yeah. Yep.
So, okay, thank you.
Yeah.
I just want to make notice of the fact that we have a significant more number of students within the region that applied to and made it into the program. What do you think that, anything that you can think that's owing to, or why there was such a big jump between last year and this year?
I think just in general, the program has really made strides, across the board. We've sort of prioritized the 8th grade course this summer as well as our, feeder course. So our new staff and current, or all of our ag teachers this year have really prioritized this, stepped it up, and I think it shows, especially in the in-district applications here. But there's good things happening.
John.
Tyler, do you feel that the increase in the state grant dollars is helping the enrollment?
I think, well, Nicole's going to talk about that here in a second. I don't know, if they're necessarily linked here. These numbers. Got a couple slides on that too.
I have a question. You said that you pushed aside, or you don't need a 5th staff member for the 24-25 school year. But yet you have a very large incoming freshman class.
Yeah, I think we can certainly use it, but just after discussions with central office and administration, it's been decided to move on to the next school year possibly. It is going to take some work when course requests start coming in 2 weeks. And that's Sophia and I have an appointment already to sort of map out what our classes will look like and the enrollment in each class.
Okay. So I think my concern is that we have such a large class coming in, and we pride ourselves on the size of our classes.
Yeah.
And if you have this large class coming in and you don't have that 5th staff member, what is that going to do to the size of the agri-science classes that you offer? And how is that going to impact the students?
We did work with the guidance department and mapping out classes and how many kids would be in each student. How many kids would be in each class given 4 teachers versus 5 teachers, and what would have to change if we had 4 teachers versus 5. And Tyler may be able to speak more intelligently about that, but I know that some of the things that we will have to give up by not having a 5th agri-science teacher is more things that we won't add. So we're not losing anything, but we won't be able to add some new courses that aren't currently being run. They'll have to wait until that 5th teacher is introduced. And we will have 1 teacher split between the plant science and the food science labs, where ideally with Tyler's future plan, his vision is to have a teacher dedicated to each space.
Okay, so let me just make sure I'm getting this correctly. So you will not be able to you will not be able to offer certain classes because you don't have that 5th staff member this coming year.
We'll be able to offer new classes.
Should we be offering those new classes?
I think when the student population warrants it and we're ready to, absolutely.
Okay.
But I think that you have to look at the totality of the budget as a district and the decisions we're making. I do think that balancing from year to year is important. I think that math teacher that we are adding, has a significant, where we're playing catch up. Where when we add an agri-science teacher, that's, we're not playing catch up, we're broadening.
Correct.
So I think it's important, with the math teacher, to play the catch up, we need to play until we can add the agri-science teacher to broaden.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Can I just add one thing to that? I think in the future, and we talked about this, we look at, there were 4 pathways, as you know, when agri-science opened. Now there are 5, and for good reason. They started to realize that large animals, small animals have a different care level, instructional level, completely makes sense. But as we plan, and we talked about this with the administrative team, you have to look at that and plan in advance. It can't be the other way around. We can't say, oh, now we have 5 pathways, let's get another teacher. It should have happened simultaneously. So what we're looking at is, what can we do for a year so there's not a burden on taxpayers when we promised there would not be? So that's another piece of this. How do we do it in a way that's palatable for the community? How can we reschedule things? And we did talk about looking so it's not burdening any one teacher because they're handling more than one kind of lab. That is, I thought a lot about this, and Tyler knows and Nicole knows it was stressful because as a high school person and an agri-science supporter, I would want to do that. But you have to look at what's fair is what is priority this year, and can we hold off one more year? My sense would have been, I would have done it a very different way. If we're going to split, we started with 4, that's what we said we were doing, and now we have 5, which for all good reasons. But we just have to wait on the, we should have had the resources to do it, right? That's how it works.
And it's only for 1 year.
That's,
Correct.
we've talked about and tuition will offset it. So it makes all the sense in the world to do it in a logical manner like that, if that makes sense.
Clarification. Appreciate that.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but is there an opportunity, Tyler, will you be assisting in teaching classes this year as well?
This year,
Next year, sorry.
that's what we've talked about, yeah.
Yeah. So that would help to assist possibly with the year that we're holding off getting the addition.
Yeah.
What are the amount of seniors graduating this year?
$25.
Was just trying to see the balance of the 60 coming in and what was going out, and if there was that far of a difference, so.
Sure. I think we're gonna start seeing less attrition as well. I think that as we get into the senior year classes, that will, be similar to when we enrolled them as freshmen. That's the whole big reason.
Thank you.
Another question, you say 25 are graduating? It says 37 seniors. What happened to the other 12?
This is. So this is.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm
Okay.
sorry. I
Yeah.
did,
No, it's all good. Those are juniors. Yep. Anything else?
Thank you.
Thanks, Anna. So I'm going to talk about agri-science funding. Enrollment is a good segue into funding. It's been an interesting year for districts and reps to operate agricultural centers. And magnet schools. There's been a lot of discussion and lots of different pieces and versions of legislation. So the 2 scenarios that I'm showing on the slides seemed the most likely 2 months ago when we began to work on the budget. And even 3 weeks ago, things were changing as we were finalizing the budget. But I do still believe that these 2 scenarios look the most likely given the latest developments, and it has flip-flopped since the slide was put together, and now we're back to where we started a few weeks ago. The good news is that either of these scenarios will leave the agri-science level funded for the coming year. In both scenarios, the ASTE grant, which is the $5,200 that's paid to us for each of our agri-science students, will remain at that level. And the current legislation, so the House bill that was passed, caps sending town tuition at 58% of what they paid in the past. And it calls for the state to make up the difference. So you can see in the first column, the state would have to pay an additional portion of the tuition of $2,866, which would reduce our sending town's obligations to $3,957. The math still comes out to $12,023 per student. What happened is, even though that bill is the bill that's active and has been passed into legislation, a week or two ago, when the governor passed his education or presented his education implementer bill that tackles different line items of the budget, he is reversing the funding for that House bill and reverting it to the way that we're currently funded. So that the towns, he's removing the 58% cap from the towns will continue to fund the 6823. And the state will continue to fund the 5200. This doesn't have a lot of bearing on tonight's discussion or even next year, but I did want to just mention, because I think it should be on the board's radar, that a new bill was just introduced called House Bill 5212. So at House Bill 5212, it's being advocated to help move funding towards being student-centered and further within education. And while that new bill keeps the agri-science tuition at $12,023 per student, it makes it 100% the responsibility of the state, which they've been talking about for years. But the difference is that $12,023 will be adjusted based in accordance with each town's ECS formula. And the ECS formulas, when they're calculated, they have different variables from town to town, and things like town wealth weigh into that calculation. So if that bill were to become a reality, then we would be looking once again at a completely different funding structure for us based on our ECS formula. But that's just sort of hit the floor within the last few days. So it is out there. So just to say that although we're hoping to stay level funded with this, one of these two scenarios for the coming year, we'll be talking about agri-science funding probably for the next few years to come. So what do these numbers mean to us based on the enrollment numbers that Tyler just shared? So either scenario 1 or 2 is going to result in the same funding for us. So as we talked about from year to year, the state funding is in arrears. So we'll be paid the $5,200 based on our 10/1/23 enrollment. So we know that number. It's in column 2. That's a fixed number. So the state tuition for the state ASTE grant next year will be $764,400. We'll caution that there is a set amount in that line item for the state to be paid to agri-science centers. And although the statute does say that we're to receive not less than 5,200, we are actually receiving in the year we're sitting in 4,998 because there are more agri-science students than we're anticipating in that line item. So we do expect, we're hoping that they'll adjust it to be back to 5,200 next year. And we're using our projected numbers for the town funding. We're projecting 128 sending town students. So that would bring our projected revenue to $1,637,744 for next year. So that number is a little bit different than what I've projected in the budget. We always like to set aside a little bit for attrition. We're actually setting aside less than I would like to, just because that number has been a moving target. We've got our revenue projected at closer to 1.7 million. So what we know today has reduced it a little bit. So the number we're using as the revenue offset in our budget is 1.618832, which you've seen in all the budget documents that we've circulated. So what does that look like for the agri-science program? So if you add the department's expenses, which Tyler spoke to, the 175,000, staffing expenses are 852,000, facilities expenses, which are our heat, propane, gas, custodial, debt service, are 769,000. So our total expenses projected for next year is 1.796 million. So we'll be running a little bit of a deficit next year, but remember, we're being paid for this year's kids next year. So if you look at the following year and you use the same analysis to project these numbers, the following year revenue would be 1.95 million. So we do expect the uptick in the following year. And that's part of the reason we were waiting to hire the fifth teacher, is when we can offset that expense with the revenue, it will also close most of the deficit that you're seeing here. So while we're running in the current year that we're sitting in, we're running pretty close to break even as we had promised. Next year, we will take a little bit of a dip, but the following year will recover. If what we're projecting comes to fruition. That was the last of the exercise. Any questions?
Thank you. You explained what I was referring to though. At some point, the state was projected to go 8,000 and that evaporated.
So it wasn't that the state was projected to go at 8,000 and create that excess over funding. The state was projected to go to 8,000 because the towns were going to be reduced by that same amount. So it was a break even. Ben, can you go back 2 slides? So here where you have the state paying the 2,866, we paying 3,907. So we're not picking up 8,000, we're just breaking down the 6,000.
Questions? Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. I'd just like to first off thank Dr. Rodriguez and Nicole Grant for helping out producing this budget and all the fun stuff that we're got going on here. It was definitely a strong team effort all the way around. For technology, we're have a nominal increase of $493. Still providing the same service, the quality of service that we are accustomed to here. We're looking some highlights to add in all the network switches. Our current fleet is approaching 10 years old, would be 10 years old at the end of this year. They limit us a little bit in some functionality on some of the things that we're trying to do in centralizing some of our services. The new fleet, the new technology that it comes along with it provides so much more security and flexibility for the district. We're really looking forward to that. Another new highlight that we're going for this year is a new fleet of teacher devices, replacing MacBooks and Windows devices in their hands, which are and can be very expensive for a very high quality, but half the cost of a Chromebook. We have a few in district already that have been piloted by some teachers, especially some teachers that really weren't so happy with the proposed change. But I think we won them over with the functionality of the Chromebooks, and also combining that with a Chromebox device that would attach to our interactive flat panels that really turn them into a very powerful tablet versus some of the limitations that the current ones have. So between those two devices that we're bringing in, we will have no reduction in functionality of our teachers in the classroom. We'll still be flying high on the edge of technology. Some of the things that we were able to do with that changeover is lower the cost of the antivirus that we use. We use a product from Palo Alto called Cortex. It is the top of the line product, and it runs pretty expensive, but reducing the MacBooks and Windows desktops, the laptops, we're able to reduce that cost significantly, as well as our device management, which is FileWave. We don't need nearly as many licenses to manage those devices, where we can use an admin console to manage our Chromebooks and our Chrome devices. And another change that we are implementing is our current web filter. We used a product called Securely way back in when we first kind of expanded wireless here, and we had that the Academy learning program where we first piloted the Chromebooks. and we used Securely then, and their product has just exploded in its technology and capabilities and can encompass a few of the other programs that we're using. So we're going to migrate over to that this year and start exploring some of the other parts of it to eliminate some of the other products that we have as well in the future. That's all I have. Sorry, anybody has any questions?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I would like to highlight our Chicago athletic budget. If we look at the very bottom item, the addition of esports, that represents really the only new thing that we are doing with this budget. Esports is going to follow under the umbrella of athletics, and as you can see, we have $1,200 in there. The rest of the increases are all just what the cost of what we're already doing is going to be. One of the big ones, we use a product called Arbiter Pay. And Arbiter is a suite of online products that athletic directors use and officials assigners use to schedule athletics. All of the contests in the state of Connecticut that are played under CIAC are scheduled using Arbiter. We use Arbiter Pay to pay our officials. And what we do is we take money from our officials budget, we put it into our Arbiter Pay account, and then when an official comes and works a contest for Chicago, we just go into Arbiter Pay and we pay them directly. So it's an electronic payment. Back before we had Arbiter Pay, it would be a request from me, and it would go to someone in the front office, then it would go down to the business office, it would go to someone else, and then they'd send out a check. And I know there's a lot of tax implications that Nicole could probably talk about, that we don't have that responsibility at all now because we're not paying the officials. Arbiter Pay is paying the officials. But anyway, back in 2020, when COVID canceled the spring season, we ended up with a surplus in our Arbiter Pay account. And then for the 2020-2021 school year, because of COVID, our schedules were vastly reduced to what we had expected and budgeted for. So we've kind of had this bubble in our Arbiter Pay account based on that surplus. So the last 3 or 4 years, we've been underfunding the account. We have been putting in less into the account than we were actually spending because we had that surplus left over. And Nicole and I knew that we were kicking this can down the road, and we were going to get to the point where that surplus had been exhausted. And that's where we are now. That surplus is up, it's exhausted. We have to fund it back to where we need to fund it. So that accounts for the 4,250 increase in officials fees. And another thing to just point out, every year officials fees go up, and the way that they go up is there's a contract between all the different officials groups in the state of Connecticut and the CIAC. And what they do is they take what the average percent increase of teacher contracts are for that year, whatever all of them are, and whatever that average percent increase is, that's the percent increase that the officials get for their contract for the following year. So that happens every year. So dues and fees, you see that's up by 7,300. That's not really new spending. We have always taken that out of athletic officials. And in talking with Nicole, we felt like that's not the right place for that to be, just for the sake of transparency and just for the sake of being able to take a look and see exactly what we're doing. It's just more clear. So that's being moved. So it looks like a big jump, but it's really not. And dues and fees, what we pay out of that mostly are entry fees. If our indoor track team goes down to New Haven to compete, we pay an entry fee. If the Berkshire League runs an end of year tournament or a championship, we have to pay whatever our portion is for that. And that all comes out of dues and fees. The transportation contract has gone up. That's not because we're requesting anything additionally, but our contract with All Star Transportation has gone up. I guess it's going up everywhere. And that's really it. That accounts for the increases in the athletic budget. I don't think I missed anything. Does anyone have any questions?
Alex?
Now, this may be a stupid question. I don't know, what is esports?
So esports, it's computer gaming. We've had it as a club the past couple of years. What they do is schools have teams, and the CIAC has adopted it. Really what the CIAC does is there's a company that they have that's a national company that runs it for them. There's tournaments, they have competitions. The Chippewa esports team goes against the Torrington esports team, and they have different video games that they actually compete in. So what they're doing is competing online in a video game against the other another school, and it's something that really is a big thing, not just in Connecticut, but worldwide. It's a big deal, and we have a small club that is growing, and we've kind of taken that under our umbrella, and so that's that.
Thank you. Keep it up.
Well, mine's not a question, but it's just a statement. But I'm gonna put Nicole on the spot. I'd love to have the discussion on turf fields. So I'm just gonna put that out there because I noticed it's not on the budget.
Yeah, well, I mean, I could increase my request by 5,195,760. I'm happy to do it. All right, well, thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, we'll move on to the consent agenda. There are two items on the consent agenda, the Board of Education special meeting minutes of February 26th and the regular meeting of February 26th. Is there anyone that wants to remove either of those minutes from the consent agenda for the purpose of making changes or discussing them? Hearing none, those will go through and will be deemed adopted. Reports and recognition. I've got just a couple of things. I've been talking with the superintendent about the need and the possibility of creating a board level committee related to agri-science. It would be a committee that would interact with the advisory committee and would be able to let the board take a look at what's going on in agri-science and determine where we need to go with that. My vision of it would be a relatively small committee, possibly 3 people. And they would act as liaison with the consulting committee. I'd like to see if anyone has any thoughts on this, and I would think it would be helpful, to let me know if you're interested, if you have any interest in serving on this committee. But in any event, does anyone have any thoughts? Preliminary thoughts on this?
I think it's actually a great idea. So if you could just explain a little bit more about it, would it be a subcommittee like we have for right now, which is like long-range planning, et cetera?
It would be on par with it. It would be a committee just like those committees. Sometimes we call them subcommittees, but they're really committees.
So it's just a committee that you would sign up for essentially.
Yeah, we
July.
would have a committee we'd sign up for. I mean, my initial thought on it was it would be helpful for what the committee is doing. Because among other things, the consulting committee does make recommendations on both facilities and curriculum. And so it would be helpful if we had a board member who's on F&O and a board member who's on the curriculum and educational program committee.
Mhm.
I'm not married to that concept, but I think it would be helpful for what the committee is trying to do. So if you sit on one of those committees, think about it. And then, I could see it being a committee of 3 or a committee of 4, but I wouldn't want to go too many.
And does our new curriculum director, would that be because I would imagine the curriculum director has more of a say in terms of curriculum than the committee would.
I would think that you would want that person to be a staff liaison to it.
I think I even brought that up
Yeah.
when we spoke. I think that would be a.
Yeah, it made sense. And I think if there's a strong connection there between those committees on the board, I don't know that the committee has a tremendous, that there's a tremendous amount that gets done, but what the committee does want to do is to maintain that liaison, to become somewhat expert in these areas so that when we have an issue that comes up in ag science, they can advise the board. The committee is very helpful, to be able to tell us what they've looked at because they've seen it on the ground floor. Whereas we're sitting up here at 30,000 feet. The question is, if you're down there at 5,000 feet or off the ground, can you add something to this discussion? Can we really take this program to a high level? I think that's important. And also, if we're going to properly use the resources that the consulting committee gives us, the experience of these people and what have you, I think that's the best way to do it is to a committee like that, rather than just having them out there doing their thing and who are they talking to? Yes, Vicky.
Forgive my ignorance. There's an advisory committee for the agri-science program. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And this committee would be formed from board members. And who would we communicate with? Tyler or the advisory committee or both, or how would
Both.
that work?
It actually would go through the administration, but it would be both because, this is important to have the director of that program, the vice principal, involved in that. That's absolutely critical.
Absolutely.
Absolutely,
Agree with
must
you.
be.
Couldn't agree with you more.
Yeah.
So the advisory committee that is already in place, do they meet regularly with Tyler? And would we be a part of I'm just trying to understand.
I
This is all.
Yeah, I actually, that committee by state statute is supposed to meet at least twice a year. I think they meet a lot more frequently, but it also needs to be properly composed. It needs to be composed that it's supposed to have 2 representatives from the 3 Region 12 towns, not 2 from each town, not 3 from each town, but 2 from the 3 towns. And then each of the sending towns is supposed to have 2 people in the committee. That's the way it's designed to be constructed. And so the committee needs a little bit of an amendment to make sure that it's properly constituted, because we want to be able to reach into the sending towns. We want to have those people involved. And the other question is, how often should it meet? If it meets too often, then the problem is you're putting a burden on sending town people. Somebody coming an hour to that meeting and an hour back, or 45 minutes to the meeting and 45 back, depending on what corner of the town they live in. It becomes a big burden trying to serve on that committee. So I think what we want to do is by having a board liaison with them, we have the ability to try to leverage those, a fewer set of meetings, so that we get more involvement from the sending team. I think that's the general idea. But also to have the board hear what's going on, rather than having a committee doing one thing, Tyler doing something else, the board doing something else. It would be helpful if that all came together in a meaningful way, under the leadership of the administration. Yeah.
Does it have any, are there any issues if the board members don't have any agri-science background?
I don't think that's not a necessity.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just trying to ask questions here. Thank you.
Yeah, no, I don't think you need to have your own set of animals or farm grown farm.
Thank you.
You don't need a green thumb.
So what's the timeline for the formation of the board? Is that going to happen before the end of the year, or is that something we're looking forward to, like when we sign up for committees?
Well, we haven't really gotten that far yet to decide exactly when this thing comes off. I think it depends on where the committee, the advisory committee goes in terms of that. The superintendent and I will talk about that, but my initial inclination was to try to appoint this committee before the end of the year. If we can at least get one meeting with with all the parties together, we could figure things out, how this works.
Now that we know that we need to kind of restructure or, make that advisory committee more compliant with, the state statute, has that process already started? Or are we-
The superintendent knows more about that.
Yeah, so we had one meeting and Tyler was at that meeting as well. Just really talking about kind of the formation, and I've talked to colleagues because it came up to me, actually, that's why it was brought up. But we're working on sort of how did it form, and to be fair, I'm not sure they have had more meetings. You know, you can speak with them directly, but when I asked that question, it was, your standard 2 or 3 times a year. So they are fully aware of that. And, we had a really great conversation. My biggest point was we need to be collaborative. We need to get things done. We need to be productive, and they agreed. And one of the things that came up was the formation. Wouldn't it be great if there was a committee? Like, agri-science is such an important part of this district that, working with the board so that and have a really clear understanding of what's going on rather than just from the consulting committee to Tyler to. So I want to try to kind of coalesce this and make everyone feel heard and get things done.
We get more board awareness.
Yeah, I,
Board's responsibility to reform the advisory committee or like.
No, and-
No.
And I think we're looking at it, and let's just look at I honestly didn't get into that, who's not on it. I know, and we had a good conversation on, it wasn't anyone's, it wasn't anyone's fault in how that worked. Sometimes you don't get volunteers or the boards didn't appoint. Whatever that is no one's fault. I think we just have to look at, do we have a good representation for those towns that I did seek legal counsel just so I understood what that all meant. And you don't have to fill in the gaps if, say, Bethel didn't have 2 people or Newtown only had 1. As long as we have a representative sample, I think makes it, fair.
yeah, and I think that would help us with everything about this program, from recruitment to just the way the program runs. We had more input, more understanding, and more involvement.
And I do want to say, for those members that are on the committee, and I think we had a really good meeting. They have put in so much time
Yeah.
and effort prior to this even being formulated, right? So I want to make sure that everyone knows that and hears that, because they were out there marketing this program before it ever went up. So they've done a lot of work, and I want to respect that. And,
Thank you.
You have something?
So, just a couple of things that I was thinking was that, in terms of finding from the sending towns, is that the responsibility of the superintendent to be able?
Boards, it's the boards.
It's the boards
boards
themselves,
appoint them.
right? But I'm saying, but in terms of going out to the boards, is that an administrative position? Would Tyler be doing that, or you reaching out to the sending towns to have them? take the-
Laura.
that should have come from the district, from the superintendent when this first started. So again, I'm not really sure. I think there was a committee prior to that, and it kind of coalesced into this, right? Right. If they're not already represented.
That's right. Yes.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Mary and then Angela. Or Angela, then Mary. I'm sorry, I got you.
Mary.
Do you want this one? So I'm just thinking if the committee, the advisory committee only meets 2 or 3 times a year and you do have a problem getting, this is far for those sending towns, you give them the Zoom option. So you can show up or you can have a Zoom option and you might get a parent that says, twice a year on Zoom, I can do that.
Well, it may or may not be apparent, because remember, the whole point of the advisory committee is to get people from the industry, the agricultural industry. So yeah, it could be anyone.
Give up 2 hours on Zoom for drive an hour to our meeting, drive an hour.
Yeah, Mary.
If you were on the advisory committee, would that exclude you from being on the board committee? Or if you're on the board committee, does it exclude you from the advisory?
The advisory committee members cannot be on the board.
Okay.
So yeah, it would definitely be, and it would be two separate. See, right now, ag science falls under a lot of areas. committees. I mean, it falls under curriculum, it falls under finance, it falls under operations. So it really hits a lot of committees, and it would be nice to have one committee looking at it from an overarching view with representation from the other committees, so that if there was a facilities need, for example, it could be brought back to F&O. If there was a curriculum question, a curriculum issue, it would involve the curriculum committee, and it would keep the curriculum committee on top of things going on in the ag science program, which is sort of part of their portfolio. But it becomes the poor stepchild when you don't have board focus on it. So I think that was sort of the thing that made this a sensible thing to me, in my estimation.
Very good. No, you just raised a really good point I wanted to mention. That's a really good example of the advisory committee and the communication and going through, say, a director, the first, obviously, even prior to Tyler coming on, we didn't have a director. I mean, it was Teresa, right? Teresa DeBrito was put in charge of that. So, to their credit, the advisory committee is saying, look, we have a list of things. We're supposed to be recommending things, facilities that, we need to, find a solution for, right? But where does it go? I mean, it can't all fall on a director of a program. You have to know it as a board. We have to make sure that it gets into our budgets. So I felt really badly leaving that meeting thinking, how could we have all these issues, right? That we need to come together so things start getting done in the right way. And I think it's just been a lot of communication all over the place. And it's not really Tyler's single job to be able to find solutions for all of those things. A lot of them are budgetary in nature, if that makes sense.
And that makes them essentially political, and that brings them within our ambit, and that's why it made some sense. Look, the committee got formed. They did the best they could without getting people. The other towns just weren't sending people, and so they filled it up, and they're doing their job, and they're working really hard. Same thing with the board. I mean, we paid attention to certain things. We looked at the construction project. We looked at the start of the school. We looked at, the financial end of it and everything. But, we didn't know what we didn't know starting into this process. And now we know a lot more. So now it's an opportunity to start leveraging all of these resources. I mean, this committee this advisory committee is hugely valuable. But if they're not talking to us, we're not hearing them, it's kind of wasting their time. It's not fair to them. And also it puts Tyler in the terrible position of being in the middle of it when in fact he needs to run the program. And when you have a meeting, when you have all the parties there, the other parties can understand how the program has to be run, how we run this program, and what are some of the issues. It would be nice to have everything in the world, but it has to fit within the pattern of how our budget proceeds. And also what we told the taxpayers when we started this program, which is that it was going to be self-sustaining. And so it's very important that we keep faith by keeping that done. And it becomes hard when everybody is not at the same meeting and on the same page. And so that's one thing we're hoping to get from this. And we're hoping that the board will be able to, the members of the board that are serving as the board committee on agriculture will bring back some of these ideas to the rest of the board. So that's the whole idea of it. I think it'll be good. Yeah.
And also too, it makes it, if they're meeting, and really the majority of agri-science committees meet minimum twice a year. So it's not like it's a monthly meeting, right? So that really allows, so again, we're not putting all of the expectations on the committee to do the job that really is the director. So we're just liaisons in order to help to create messages to the board, kind of like when I think about Joe going to an advanced meeting, coming back and informing the board of what's going on. It just gives an opportunity for not only to sit and be participating, but also to share with the board all the great stuff too, and stuff that's going on.
No, absolutely. Look, I think it's a way to leverage the great experience we have and the great people we have that are involved in this process to really make this a better program. And I think that's critical and that's important. So I will discuss with the superintendent the timing of this. We'll try to figure out who might want to serve and who might be good, and we'll go from there. I will report back to you. Okay. One last thing on the budget process. Tonight, we're going to spend some time. We have an item on the agenda to actually, we don't. Well, if people have questions, we will want to start to entertain them tonight. Our next meeting is the district budget hearing. Oh, that's right. I'm sorry. I'm looking at an older version of the agenda. My fault. Yeah, so the next step after tonight will be there'll be an F&O meeting on the 11th, followed by a district budget hearing on the 11th. And that's when we're going to hear from the public. So I think that it's important that we focus our attention on what the public presents at that meeting, if anything. And then on March 18th, we're going to have our budget workshop where we're going to consider all of these things, starting the week of the 18th, after the 18th, starting on the 19th. Nicole and I guess Lori will be meeting with the boards of finance to discuss our budget with them. So at that point, by the time we get to that point of the 18th, I would like our budget to be, after that workshop, to be pretty concrete so that we're not making changes at the decision. If issues are out there or if concerns are out there, they need to be raised well enough in advance. Because once we present to the boards of finance, I would like that to be the budget that we move to adopt on the 25th. So that would be the program, and I think it'll be, helpful to us and helpful to the towns. And I think the towns have derived some comfort from the fact that they've been given the information on what the enrollment projections can do to their budgets. Now that's going to change their budgets. They've been given that information already, and it's helpful for them to have that. So again, I think this will be an opportunity for us to really do this correctly. So when we get to that point in the meeting tonight, we'll take up a discussion of that. So that's it for my report.
This is an add-on. The F&O meeting for the 11th at 10 o'clock has been canceled. So don't show up.
I better get modern.
We just canceled it.
No,
just now.
That's okay. Okay, we'll move on to the superintendent.
So, well, I first wanted to thank all of my administrative team for their excellent presentations, and I know it was a first for them, but I think it was Vic who talked about a collective effort for this budget, and it truly was. And I hope they're highlighting aspects of their budget and putting it into greater context. What was, helpful for all of you as board members. But thanks to all of my team. They did a great job. But I'd like to focus my superintendent's report this evening on athletics. I haven't done that in a while. The Chapag swimming and diving team will be participating in the CIAC Class S state championships this week. We'll have a diver participating on Wednesday at Sheehan High School in Wallingford. And Friday, the swimmers will participate in the swimming trials, and the final is actually on Monday at Cornerstone Aquatic Center. The ice hockey team had a CIAC Division III quarterfinals game today, and that was at 3:45 against Suffield Granby Windsor Locks at the International Skating Center in Simsbury. Unfortunately, they lost in sudden death overtime. But I just wanted to say, still so proud of our team. They had a great season. The boys basketball team played in the Berkshire League Tournament Championship game this past Friday night in front of a packed house with so many Chapag fans. Really wonderful. Unfortunately, the Spartans lost a heartbreaker to Nanawag, but all in attendance were, again, so very proud of how they represented Region 12. The team, just so you know, is going to host Harding High School from Bridgeport on Tuesday night at 6:30 in a CIAC Division III first round game. And then the winner will face off against the winner of Tuesday's Immaculate versus North Haven game. And if Chapag wins, we will host that game on Thursday since we're the higher seed. And we just learned of this today. The boys and girls basketball won their sportsmanship award given by the officials and they will be recognized at their annual banquet. So that's so impressive for our students, both the boys and the girls teams. So, yeah, really exciting. And thank you to Matt Parachi, who always does an outstanding job as the director. In personnel, we have some appointments. Crystal Ann Curry will be a new substitute, and she will be subbing for the agri-science operations assistant at Chippewa Valley School. We have Bridget Snyder, who's taking on a paraprofessional role at Chippewa, and also a musical assistant director at Chippewa. A leave of absence, Sarah Curran, our intervention teacher at Booth Free School, will be out from May 8th to August 21st. We have a transfer of Caitlin Barksdale, will be a math tutor at Chippewa. And the resignation, unfortunately, of Adrian Pelletier, library clerk at Chippewa, and that is effective March 13th. And then finally, a field trip notification. We have 50 students going for art to the Botanical Gardens in Bronx, New York on April the 11th. And that's grades 9 through 12.
Thank you very much. John,
I don't know, perhaps at some point this is going to be a topic for an agenda item, but almost daily you hear about reports, news reports, or read an article concerning artificial intelligence and how it is definitely having an impact on education as far as students preparing assignments and papers and the like. I mean, I heard of college students getting A's on papers they never wrote. They submitted them because of through artificial intelligence. So what is on the front?
Actually, the conference we're going on transformational leadership in March 20th, making a team. That's one of the items is AI. But I will tell you that as a former English teacher, I was astounded when I tested it myself, like write me a poem on, and I did. I just made something up to see what was happening at the other end. But I just found out that all those features that teachers use, Turnitin.com and colleges, they will pick up on AI. They will give you a percentage that this was predominantly AI generated. Don't ask me the technical side of that and how that works, how they know that, but that is happening. And I just spoke to someone I know who's a Yale professor who says they use it all the time because it's happening. You're right, even at the college level.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask Vic. There are safeguards then.
There are. I actually asked that question purposefully because I wanted to know, we'd always, even when you do your dissertation, you'd put it through so it would tell you a percentage of, how much of it was your own. And that was just automatic. So they are being able to look, computers can do anything, right? And that also means looking for computer generated type material. Again, I don't know how accurate, but I just know that was what I was told.
But also, when we conceive of what outputs we want from students and what is the most authentic and the most project-based and the kinds of student artifacts most likely to be useful to students and the world, it's hard for kids to do those kinds of things only with AI. So if the idea isn't just to report facts, or create some artifact that can be canned, but rather to do some project, solve some problem. Kids might use AI along the way to do some of the research and help scaffold up to the end result. But the actual end result of creating a museum exhibit or delivering food to a food pantry or whatever we're going to be doing, hopefully that will inspire our learning here, is beyond the ambit of AI.
That's a great point. You're right. The other side of things is the world is AI now. It really is. So we also have to keep that in mind that when you get into industry and business, it's computer generated. It will be. So we have to balance that when we're teaching students as well.
Okay,
But we'll get to, oh, wait, there's one more.
John, to your point, it's become very easy as a teacher to detect when students are using AI. I assign a lot of writing because I'm an English teacher, and after a couple of weeks into the year, what a student is capable of. I caught a kid today cheating. I've got it. He admitted he used a program, or they admitted they used a program to do it. So it jumps out to you. It's glaring, and the usual tell is the variation in sentence structure, and they'll use words that are not common in the everyday lexicon. Pretty much, yeah.
well, that's what we need. We need to take artificial intelligence and dumb it down so that people.
This is a different subject. Several places, one was 60 Minutes, and I believe it was CBS Sunday Morning did a piece on gambling in colleges. And the colleges, some of the colleges actually are telling the kids, this is what you should do, because they get a piece of the action. And there are students that end up with tens of thousands of dollars that they owe because of this gambling. So maybe it's something that we should present to some of the parents and students about this. You can look online and pick up the article, the presentations that they both had. But that was something that really made me go, oh, really? You don't get enough intuition that you have to actually get a kickback from gambling? It just made no sense to me, and it made me aggravated, and that's never good.
Well, I hate to say it, Mary, but I think that one has left the barn. I mean, when the National Football League advertises gambling and you have the official people associated with major sports leagues, I think as a society, we are gamblers now. Las Vegas is spread across the land from east to west. Anyway, okay, any other questions on the superintendent's report? Okay, which we'll move on to the treasurer's report, Alec.
Okay, I'm gonna sort of combine my treasury report and my finance and operations report. Later on, we're gonna be considering under new business, the transportation contract and the audit. Those are the two things that we just discussed at the F&O meeting an hour ago, 2 hours ago now, probably. But the thing I want to bring up is we've had the proposed budget for a week now. Now I spent a good part of the weekend going through it page by page. I would really appreciate if people would review it now and see if they have a problem or a question. And let's get those questions out there so they can get answered as soon as possible. Because sometimes an answer brings up another question. So I would appreciate if everyone would spend some time, look at the budget and see what their thoughts are and bring them back either to Nicole or to me or to Greg. And we'll see if we can find an answer for you. But that's really the only thing I have to say as the treasurer.
Okay, we'll move on then to the committee reports, curriculum and educational program. Yep.
Nothing new. Our next meeting is 2 weeks from tonight.
All right. Joe, at advance.
Nothing new. Our next meeting is this Thursday.
F and O, Alex.
Okay. Look at the budget.
That was succinct. Policy committee, we have not met since our last meeting, but we do have 2 items for second reading on tonight's agenda. Negotiations committee, we're in the process of what we talk. I've been in touch with Tom, and we're setting up a meeting where he will come in and discuss the contracts and the administration's needs going forward on that. And so we'll be moving those on further, 3 contracts we have to negotiate. Strategic long-range planning, Jen.
Lori and I are in the process of discussing scheduling the next meeting. I know there's one in April, but we'd like to do prior to that.
Okay.
Stay tuned.
All right, we'll move on to old business. We have a policy 6144.2, equitable identification of gifted and talented students. We approved it for a first reading at our last meeting, and the question is there a motion to approve this for a second reading, which would then approve it for adoption? Moved, is there a second? Moved and seconded, is there a discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed? All those abstaining? That's unanimous, 11-0. The second item on old business is to consider for adoption and approve for second reading, consider for adoption policy number 6173, enrollment in advanced course of program and challenging curriculum. Is there a motion to approve that for a second reading and adopt it? There a second? Moved and seconded. Discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, say nay. All those abstaining, please so indicate. That's 11-0. New business. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm looking at the wrong one again. Discussion of the superintendent's proposed 24-25 budget. Do we have, preliminarily, do you have any comments you want to start with? Otherwise, we'll go to questions. Okay. Yeah, I think you've said it all multiple times. Okay, questions? Everyone's now committed this budget to memory, I presume, so we should be in good shape. Anyone have a comment about the general,
Having spent some time with this, my feeling is that it is a responsible budget considering the times we live in. To come up with a 4.49% increase. But would be reduced if, Nicole, if I'm correct, more like 4.25. Yeah, which what we'll be asking for because the money's back. The one thing, and Nicole keeps stressing this with me, the one thing we have no control over is enrollment. From year to year, you don't know until September 1st how many kids you're going to end up having. So the numbers fluctuate between how much each town is responsible for. And we've had some anomalies in this. Last year, Bridgewater got hit very hard and Roxbury got hit very light or it didn't get hit. This year, it's just the opposite. We talked at one point about trying to maybe have a 3-year average program where everything sort of leveled out. The towns didn't react well to that. And I think what we need to encourage them then, if they have a year where they're getting some monies back and not being hit that hard, that they maybe put some money aside for the years that they are gonna be hit. Because it is gonna, in the long run, it averages out. That's my thought on that. The budget, I think, I am personally worried a little bit about Roxbury, because Roxbury is taking a big hit this year. Bridgewater is not, and, Washington, is a little bit in between. But anyway, once again, I stress, please look at the budget.
Okay. Other questions? Mary?
I just wanted to make something clear to me and to other people who may be looking at this. The second, what will be the second grade next year? Which was the first grade that we put in this year, that is still in the budget to have the second grade. Okay, I just wanted that so that the parents will know that that's the case. Okay. The other thing is when you have the line item for tuition in, is that for all the tuition in students that the parents pay the tuition in monies and also ag? I know, okay, so they're in two different places. Uh-huh,
Page 18 is on revenue. Is that the page you're looking at?
that's this one,
Nope. That one,
this,
page 18. There we go.
okay,
So on the left page, the revenue is
Ah.
broken down, so the $680,000 is for tuition and students, and then the agri-science revenue follows.
okay, thanks. So I can tell people that's weird. Thanks.
Could I also add, going back to the teacher from last year to see if it was moved in? So we looked at the class sizes and it was appropriate to continue that. So I just wanted to be very clear on that. Might have looked differently or people thought differently in last year's budget, but clearly appropriate in class size moving forward when you look across all the elementary schools. So I just want to clarify that.
That's good, because this way, if a parent asks, we can tell them.
John?
I kind of agree with Alex. I mean, and I realize that enrollment is the driver. Approximately how many students in Roxbury are gonna for the 25, 26? 20, 24, 25, excuse me.
$176 students will come from Roxbury.
One se-
176. Remember, these are October 1 of this year's numbers that we use. So we currently have 176 Roxbury students.
And what is it projected to increase by?
What is the budget increase?
No, there's population.
We don't use projected numbers to break it up. Current year's October 1.
You'd have to look at the previous year for Roxbury to see what that increase was. Do we have that information?
Yeah,
What are you looking for now? The number of students from Roxbury from the last school year, not the current school year, but the previous school year, because if the previous school year was 10 and this year is 12, you know it was a 20% increase.
Okay, the student enrollment as of October 1st of last year, which is not the one you want.
No, I want the year before that.
Okay, well, I don't have that number.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, we'll have it in a second.
It was
But-
176 as of this year.
As of, and that's the number we're basing this year's enrollment effect on the town of the budget is based on October 1, 23.
Keep in mind, the other factor is the other two towns went down slightly and Roxbury went up. That's very important when you look at how they got hit with that more this year or next year, I should say.
Last year they were at 166, so they increased by 10 students.
166. Yeah, that is a 6% increase. Yes.
Seven.
We
I
had
correct that
discussed,
Hold on a second. Correction.
It had Bridgewater's ag to Roxbury's non-ag, so that didn't work out right. It's actually less than that. 170 students, so they went up by 6 kids.
So that's a 3.6% increase. Wow, that's an amazing impact of the 3.6% increase. But see, the others decrease, so there's a net difference that's bigger. The net difference is actually bigger.
The others are like that.
That's very important.
So
Right, because if the other two towns went down 3 each, that doubles the change.
Bridgewater was at 140. And Washington was at 282.
Oh, geez, so that all went down radically.
Bridgewater went from 140 to how many?
$130.
They were at 130 now. They were at 140, now they're at 130, and Washington is 182.
They were at 282 and they went down to 264.
Down 18.
What was that? The second number? 264.
So you have a total of 28 and 6. So that's 34. It's a swing of 34, so you can understand how that would really impact. Yeah, it turns out it's not the greater number of Roxbury students that made the difference, it's the lesser number of the other districts that had that impact. And the best face we can put on is look on the bright side. You're succeeding in your efforts to attract people with children of school age.
Then I think it's funny, Greg.
No, I know it hurts. It's painful. It really is. It's painful, but
So Greg, I have a question
Yes.
about that, our tuition and students. We've spoken several times in various meetings about increasing the cost of tuition in. I don't see that we're talking about that anymore.
well, I don't know if the superintendent has recommendations for us. The superintendent and director of finance have recommendations for us on what we should do with tuition.
I don't want to speak out of turn, so you go first and then I'll share my opinion.
So we did increase tuition at the high school level, not last year, the year before. And I do think that there has been lots of discussions internally about raising tuition, but also about the impact of our tuition in families in the inflationary environment that we're in. I do think that if the board has an appetite to look at that, I think we should look at it.
I thought we had discussed at one discussion, grandfathering the kids that are in now at whatever price they're in now. But then, even siblings coming in or definitely new families coming in would be at that higher.
And that's what we did with this last increase that took effect last year. So we're in our second year of that increase. That's exactly what we did.
Would it make sense to have a recommendation, from the administration as to what we ought to do with that so that we can have that discussion? It won't affect the budget we're about to put through, but it will guide us in the future.
So I certainly agree, and we've been talking about looking at that. In fact, just the other day, we had that conversation. Because I looked at the numbers and, just knowing what the averages are at other towns who accept tuition in, it's low. But on the flip side of that, I think the proximity of your towns and trying to attract people, that's where the balance was at that time. That doesn't mean it has to continue in that way, but I think a reasonable increase would help.
Okay. That'll be on the agenda for a future meeting.
Yeah, maybe we should just tie it to an inflation thing and every year, whatever inflation rate is, the tuitions go up that amount every year. Whether you already in the program or not, just be told, yeah, you're paying $10 this year, but if inflation is 10%, you're gonna pay $11 next year.
There's also another number you could tie it to. You could tie it to the increase in the budget. If the
Yeah.
budget goes up 4.26%, the tuition goes up or some multiple of that. Maybe it's 2.26. I don't know. But the idea is there's a couple things you can tie it to. I think that's a good idea.
I will tell you that many districts tie it to per pupil expenditures, and it's high, but that's what you see in other districts.
When they say they tie it to it, in other words, they say that whatever our per pupil is this is what you pay.
And you're high here, you're higher here, so just know that.
Yeah.
Probably why they didn't tie it to that number, but in most towns, that's what they tie it to. The same that a taxpayer would be paying for, right? A student going to school would be the same.
Right, but the difference is though, if you are selling a seat and you're getting per pupil expenditure, then you can afford to hire the teachers it takes to teach those students. Whereas if here, what our theory was not that we were selling seats that we would have to fund the teachers for. We were selling empty seats. And it was better that the empty seats be occupied, even if the number is relatively low, than if they're not occupied. And that was the theory. Plus, we would increase the population of the student district, which would be better for the students and make scheduling issues easier for the middle high school, yes.
So are we saying that to increase the tuition, we want to encourage, because I feel like the whole point of lowering the tuition was to allow students into the district to fill the seats. So if we increase it, are we saying that I'm just worried about the message that we will be sending.
I think you could do it in a way that's palatable without, increasing it so high, you actually
Lose students.
lose students
Right.
or don't attract.
That's what I
Which is
mean.
what you
That's
want to do.
about.
But I think just given
Yeah.
the economy and all of that, you could easily increase it, even if it is, as Alex said, I think that's a great idea. Just inflationary, it becomes
Yeah,
an
I do like the
expectation
idea a lot.
every year that it increases automatic, which is pretty, lots of
Yeah.
districts do that.
What private schools do.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, see, the other thing you have to take into consideration is if you're talking about having seats go for 8,000 and change at the high school, when you could have ag science kids in the high school at 12,000. You have to ask yourself, do you want to increase the size of the ag science thing to get more money that way? Or do you want to bring the tuition seats ultimately up to at least par with that? Because the idea is that we could expand, that we've talked about whether we should expand or not expand. We want it to be self-supporting. But the question is, where do you put your tuition in emphasis? And it's a complicated thing. There's a whole bunch of stages. And that's why I think the best thing for us would be, to get the administration to put together a proposal that really will help us understand all these little nuances. And then we can question it to death. But,
There are two different issues going on here. You want to encourage kids to come, but you also want to make them pay their fair share. I think it's an economics 101 where you've got your supply and demand things, and wherever those two lines cross, that's the number. There's if we raised it so that everybody tuition in paid the actual cost of students, we wouldn't have any tuition ins. If we gave it away for free, we'd have kids falling over the place. So there's somewhere between those two numbers. And I think Nicole and Lori would best to figure out, how high can we raise it without hurting ourselves?
there is a sweet spot. Yeah. Oh.
I speak to the agri-science regularly. I just want everyone to understand and to clarify that agri-science revenue should support the agri-science program. And it's great if we want to increase enrollment and increase that revenue to boost that program. But we should never look at agri-science revenue as supplementing the regular ed side. Agri-science revenue should be dedicated to the agri-science program.
Well, I agree with you there, but what I was trying to say was that we've talked about expanding that, but there might be a concern about expanding that. How big can it get? And I think the question is, where do you put your emphasis on tuition? you would be bringing in those kids not because you wanted to support the general budget. You'd be bringing in those kids because it would make the school a better school. I mean, look, let's face it, the most important thing about the fact that people want to pay tuition to come here is we are offering a product. We are offering an education of such high quality that people want to send their kids here. And that's the most important part of it. The rest of it will just sort of work it out. From a logistical standpoint, John.
Here's another factor to this whole, tuition in. Every week I read in the paper how Sherman has an infrastructure problem. And eventually they may be forced to send the entire, middle, high school population elsewhere. The board in Sherman has more or less determined that if that happens, they want the whole aggregate to go to one place. Which raises a major question. Can we handle that kind of a population? And two, what will we do about tuitions at that point? What is the current tuition? Did we just negotiate the Sherman contract? Or last year or something?
We are in the middle of working on the new contract with Sherman.
We better find out how many students they intend to send.
Right now, the only information we have is that they're going to continue to send the high school students that they've been sending. We don't have any indication that they're going to send middle school students.
I mean, if we have to start adding teachers and stuff, I mean, that's another story. Anyway, not for next year.
Yeah, Sherman does pay a rate of tuition that would support additional staff.
Mary.
The other thing we have to be cognizant of is the fact that we're, our own people in our own communities are hearing what we charge for tuition in students, and we want to make it so that they don't go, what? You know, that they think that this is a fair thing too.
Well, we've had that discussion. And one of the things that we've said, and I've said it a million times, is you have to understand, if we were bringing in tuition in kids at less than the cost of educating, that would be a problem. But we are bringing in kids that are occupying seats that are otherwise empty. We get nothing from those seats. But with these, we generate over $1 million a year in revenue that otherwise we wouldn't get. And it doesn't increase our costs in anything but an extremely small marginal number. It's a rounding error in terms of whatever, costs are having more kids in the building. You're going to use a little more heat, and you're going to use a little more water, but we don't have huge costs, so that we tell people that. Now, they may or may not believe it, but we are very careful on the number of students we accept to make sure that that number does not cause the taxpayers to have to pay more to educate kids from outside the district. It's actually a net gain to the taxpayers of having those tuition in kids here. They're better off than they otherwise would be. So we intend to keep it that way. Am I wrong?
No, you're correct.
Okay, thank you. Always good to know. Okay, other questions about the budget? The program enhancements, are people generally pleased with those?
Mic is on.
It's on. Oh, Jane, I'm sorry. There you are.
Hi, I just want to say this document, what a lot of incredible work. And you've made it so clear to people that aren't budget people. And thank you. I just have two questions. I mean, a dishwasher, why is a dishwasher so much money?
How much is that dishwasher cost?
So it's 30, the projected cost is 35,000. It's a commercial dishwasher. It's not a dishwasher like you would think of having in your home. And it also has to have plumbing and electrical work done to install it. And it also has to have, required by the health code, it has to have a 3-bay sink attached to it and also a prep table. So it's not just a dishwasher that would fit into your counter space.
I assumed it was, and all the plumbing that has to go with something like that. And the other question,
I was right,
what's
Jane.
going on with propane?
So, the increase in propane is because, two things. One, the cost of propane has increased, over the last 2 years by about $1 a gallon each year. But the usage in our building has increased significantly because 2 years ago, when we put, the new rooftop units on our roof, the unit that now services the pool area, which is heated with propane, is now a unit that's better, provides better air quality because the prior unit just circulated existing air. And this unit pulls air from the outside, heats it, and then distributes it. So the use of propane for that new unit to pull that exterior air into the building has increased the gallons we used significantly.
It's the cost of breathing.
Okay. Thank you.
And this may be an ignorant question. Natural gas prices are going through the floor. Aren't they, isn't propane related to natural gas?
No, it's not. Liquefied petroleum.
But
It's oil.
they don't follow each other on the chart. Okay, that explains it.
Yeah. Other questions? Jane, was that it? On. Yep. Okay. All right, other questions, other points? I mean, I think the security upgrade that you put in here for elementary school is a nice little. I think you're gonna be very good. Other questions? Guess that's it. Well, anything else you have, please bring it to the next meeting. We'll move on to new, but now I think we're gonna move on to new business.
Yes.
I'm gonna look at the right one. Yeah, okay, this is the same from here on out. Okay, I'm gonna ask if there is we'll put it on the floor with a motion and then we'll talk about it. Is there a motion to approve the 2024-2029 transportation contract?
I so move.
Is there a second? Moved and seconded. Now, discussion. Do we want to have a presentation on this?
Nicole, do you want to talk on this or is there really anything to talk about?
I'll talk.
Oh, and Nicole, if you would please make sure you tell us anything that's different about between this and the last version we looked at.
So the Finance and Operations Committee has seen this a couple of times because we've been negotiating our plus contract for 5 years. So we are in our 5th year. It's up for next year. We're entering into a new 5-year contract with All-Star. They are very good to us. We like our working relationship with them. We don't go out to RFP because we know that we would not get any responses other than All-Star since they own the bus lot. We are out in an area where there's not a lot of competition for participation. That said, we're very happy with All-Stars. I don't want us to think that we're settling for All-Star because they have been a wonderful partner to us. They, in a lot of their districts, were in the middle of multiple contracts when inflation hit. So in a lot of early conversations with them, they let me know that they needed to adjust their contract for the inflation, and other people have been adjusting their contracts for the next year or so. So they originally gave us a pretty significant increase over what we're accustomed to seeing. We negotiated it a little bit. The first year is a much bigger uptick than we've seen in transportation contracts and much bigger than the preceding 4 years. So the first year's increase is 6%. And they will not budge off at that number. We try as I might. And after that, the increase is average between 3% and 4% a year. We are getting half of our bus fleet will be brand new buses. So they're retiring our oldest buses, which are
10, 12?
our oldest buses are 2015. Our newest buses are 2020. So when we entered the last contract, they replaced half 2020. So now they'll replace the 2015 to 2025. So the 2020, the oldest part of the fleet. We are looking at having them install a fuel tank on the property so that we can store diesel on the All-Star property. They have agreed to do that at their cost. There's some limited capacity to. But the hope is that once that tank is installed, two things will happen. It'll become more efficient, but we can also save on the diesel fuel that we purchase. We purchase the first 42,000 gallons of fuel every year. They purchase something because of that. You know, anything except for that. But right now we're currently wet filling our buses. What that means is a tanker truck pulls up every other day and actually puts the nozzle in every single bus on the lot. So it's the least cost effective way to purchase fuel. So we will have a 4,000 gallon tank installed and we'll be able to fill that tank once a month. Most operations and then fill our own buses, which will also be better for our team that work at All Star because we do feel that they will be make over our buses. And those are really quick. So they're happy about that and we're happy that respects to us. The only significant change besides the price is that currently there's an appendix B on the contract and it calls for field trips and athletic trips to be charged according to 3 factors. So the time, the hours driven, the miles driven, hours per week. So there's 3 different factors for the cost of each field trip and each sports trip. And we'll all start as proposed to get rid of those 3 factors and hourly rate. So we did the math and we both did it and it works out about the same. It's just a lot less administrative burden and it helps us too. The teachers have a better idea. You know, a teacher can guess how long it's going to take me to get to the science center. How long am I going to stay there? Cost. Right now, there's a calculation for every single time costs outside of our regular contract. So some of our trips will cost more under that theory. Some of our trips, more of our trips will cost less. And administratively. And other than that, the terms of this contract mirror the terms of the former contract with just a couple of minor tweaks.
Okay. Very good. Yeah, I would concur. They have been a great partner for us. They've done a lot of things for us. You know, when we had the big thing for when Megan Bennett left, they bussed those kids from all over the district and I think they refused to accept payment. So, I mean, they are really all stars. They really are. Very pleased with them. So, questions, concerns? All right, all those, John.
Just for the public knowledge, there is basically no competition though out there.
Yeah, there isn't, yet they still treat us extraordinarily well. And we've also been good, you know, to them and to our own credit, because during the COVID period of time, we didn't, you know, we continued to pay. Even though there was no transportation ongoing, I think that was appreciated. I mean, we've had a very good working relationship. And, you know, some districts went the other way on that and that's made their lives miserable. In the meantime, where do people want to work? You don't work for a district that treats you well. And we want to have a bus company that treats us well. So it's really been a symbiotic thing. It just shows you, what goes around comes around, and we've engendered that. They've been terrific. Okay. Any other questions? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, say nay. All those abstaining.
I abstain.
John abstains. 1 abstaining, 10 in favor, none against. Okay, that's adopted. I'd like to accept a motion to approve the 2022-2023 audit. And then we'll discuss it. Is there a motion? Moved. Is there a second? Moved and seconded. Now, discussion of the audit. Who wants to take that? Nicole, you want to take that one too?
Does everybody have either an electronic or paper copy that they can follow along? Yes. So I handed out at the beginning of the meeting the audit results, which is the financial return for us now. Start there since that's the highlight. We are going to distribute to our member towns as soon as the board adopts the budget. So this week we got a total of $621,373. It gets paid back to towns in the same percentages that they paid it in. So the percentages that you're looking at are the 2022-23 implement percentages. And then you can see 135,000 Bridgewater and 25,000 Roxbury. Washington.
These are the amounts of money they should not spend. They should put aside for the upcoming budget changes.
So I'm gonna go through rather quickly and just hit some highlights that I think you're interested in. If you have questions, you want to stop me along the way. You too. I think it's rather quick. So the yellow tabs are for you. So page 1, what did they audit? So this book contains our financial information audited in 2 ways. They audit it on a government-wide basis and on a fund accounting basis. Government-wide means they take all of our information and they treat us just like a for-profit company and spit out those numbers, assets, liabilities, balance sheet. Fund accounting or fund financials is more how we do our day-to-day operations. We operate on a fund basis. So we have a general fund that pays a lot of our expenses. We have the reserve fund that we set aside money for capital. So there's 2 sets of financial documents in this single audit, and the government-wide are probably less interesting to you because they have a lot of variables and a lot of assumptions and a lot of actual dollars that are just paper anything. So on the fund side, we're looking at actual dollars. On the government-wide side, we're looking at balance sheet. So if you turn to page 4, this is what's called the management discussion and analysis. A lot of people just say MBA. So it runs for 7 pages. It's pages 4 through 11. That document we draft internally. So those 7 pages is our work product, not the auditor's work product. It's our work product that explains what the auditors did. Try to do so in language that is readable and understandable. So just to highlight a few things on the MDA, if you want to, on page 5, if you want to kind of delve a little bit deeper into what I mean when I say there are government-wide statements and fund statements, it explains it that in those 2 pages, a little more than the short version I gave. On page 6, what is relevant in page 6 is what's our net position at the end of the year? How did we do year over year? So we increased our net position by $500,000. That includes the value of our assets against the depreciation that was taken on the financial statements. Page 8 is an explanation of our activities, and under government activities, the one number that I just want to draw your attention to is the column. So if you're looking at the second set of columns, government activities, you look at the total of 21,444, as opposed to the right column of 20,565. You can see that on a government-wide basis, we spent $850,000 more in 2022 than we did in 22-23 than we did in 2021. On page 10, we talk about transfers to other funds. So it's important when we think about our budget to think about this page. The middle column where it says transfers to other funds, $1.434 million. That's what you see in the budget lines. There are budget lines that include money that's transferred to other funds once the budget. Column on the left shows you where that goes. So 747,000 of it in the 22-23 year went to the debt service fund. And that's what we used to hit principal and interest on our bonds and obligations. 496 of it went to our capital reserve fund, which is our 2% fund, $100,000 to our capital elementary non-recurring fund. And lastly, and that's for you, for clearing the food service having carried forward from the days when we ran it. So we cleared that. So that's technically an account transfer. If you look at page 12, this is our balance sheet for government-wide financials. This is what we look like if we are on the business. So our net position at the end of the year was $44. On page 19, I'll talk a little bit about our pension plan. So we do have our teachers, of course, and our administrators participate in the state teachers retirement board pension, but we do have a pension for our non-certified staff. And it is held at Wells Fargo, and we have investigators and funds do not pension. And if you start at the bottom of that page, we ended the 22-23 year at $7.2 million. We started the year at $7.4 million. And where that $400,000 of gain comes in, attributed as employer, $113,000 to the fund. Our investments and dividends go off at $600,000, $700,000. So there are total investment income of 767, and then we do pay our investment as well percentage. So they would be 55,000. So our income for the year would be 165,000. That we turn around and without pension benefits, collecting benefits, 460,000. That's what we get to right now. So 404 increase for the year. When they evaluate our pension, and people like to look at what percent funded the pension is. Historically, our funding rate has been very high. There's been over 100%. Some of the assumptions that change are life expectancy, normal retirement age. Those assumptions change. So does the actuarial calculations based on the pension. So this year, did fall back to 86% funded, and that you don't break it out to you. There's also a page in the audit that will show you the history of our pension and what the funding looks like year to year. I think it goes back and forth, but 86% is not to be concerned with. That's a very good funding percentage, which is used like over 100 at different points, but it's not currently an area of concern. Pages 20 to 26, you can just skip over. It's general, it's not specific. It's general language. So page 34 is where it talks about what percent was funded from the pension. And at the bottom, you can see that our share net position is 86.3, just to give you a reference. Last year we were at 87.85. So we just follow the net pension. Big jump to page 49. So if you look at any pages in the audit that you may think, you know, what's the most meaningful part of this to me, it would be this page. This page shows you our budget and how our budget was spent, what's left over in the end. So your first column is the original budget. The next column takes into consideration the mid-year transfers we made to balance accounts with accounts made up that surpluses. The middle column is the final budget. The fourth column is our actual revenue and expenses against those same budgetary lines. So the budget you approve, how we spent the money in those things. And then the last column is whether you're over or under. Parentheses is in under. So if we look at total expenditures and other financing uses, which is about 3/4 down the page on the right column, you see a negative 22,234. That is the amount under budget. So against the rep, so if you look at the fourth column, actually, you look at the top of the revenue, you can see that we projected an agri-science revenue of 582,000. That's the revenue. We actually took into that means our investment income was higher than we thought, $13,000. Other tuition income, I'm sorry, agri-science account tuition was $830,000. I want to talk a little bit about that. We had projected 632,000. The reason it came in at 830,000 is not because we got more kids or more revenue from a tuition standpoint. It's because we have to show special education expenses somewhere in there at that line. So the difference in those two things is the money that we charge from other districts for that special education services and for those types of things. And our other tuition had actually projected 1.3 in tuition income, and with credits half of that counts at the point of invoices. So that's why it shows here 603,000. That's what we credited account. So although we did take in the 78,000, which seems like it exceeds that 6 projection, we actually fell short of our tuition revenue projection. So when you put all those numbers together, you get to about The fund balance at the end of the year is the $621,000 that I talked about at the beginning, that we're gonna redistribute back to our towns. On page 54. Just gonna point that out quickly. That's the year over year pension comparison. We want to look at the level of funding year to year. It's the third row from the bottom that shows what we've been selected. And just the last 2 points that I want to make, if you have any questions, let me know, but, on page 60 is the letter that finalizes the audit from auditors. The one sentence, in that letter that is what makes why we do this. Second sentence from the bottom, it says, given these limitations, we are audit and not identified insufficient legal control that we consider to be material. That means you have an unmodified audit.
Now, everyone understands this. See?
And it's
Bottom line, this is an extremely well-run, financially well-run district. Thank you very much. Great for that. Okay, yes.
This has nothing to do with the audit, but it has everything to do with the debt service. I think we're going on over 4 years now. The state still is reluctant to balance the reimbursement and any news on when we can expect that?
Yeah, so good news on that. We're actually working with the state right now with all of the kind of documentation. We continue to make time and request lots of documents that might about 4 weeks now to assemble. And as soon as we make that submission, which we have to bring that to finance and operations first, to get finance and operations, including authority to submit the finance documents to the state. And then once we do that, then they have now assigned the auditor and then that. So it's the first move to do that.
Okay, so it's
moving.
doable, yeah. Maybe.
I don't know how fast it moves.
So that's good news in that, once we pay off a certain amount of debt, our budget should go down.
Yeah, and to your very valid point, John, to your point, the bond that we took out when we ago for 8.25 million, which is a permanent bond, the debt service on that going into the 2025 budget is significantly reduced. Starting to see that when you bond, you're actually bonding a series of 1-year notes. So as you start to move forward on those notes, the interest rate will change on every one of those notes, but you're also paying more interest on less making principal payments for 4 years. So the debt service, our permanent debt service is down here, our temporary debt service.
Thank you. Other questions? Anything else on this audit? Okay, it's been moved to approve it and seconded. If there's nothing further, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, say nay. All those abstaining, please so indicate. It's unanimous. That has been approved. Unless there is an objection, I will consider this meeting adjourned by consent at 9:02 p.m. Thank you all very much.